A very interesting situation because through the course of the day, I've actually been uh, invited on stage as a speaker. Right now, I'm here as a moderator. And I'm very grateful to the organizers for having recognized this connection that I have with Urvashi and asking me to allow me to moderate this session. Thank you so much. Urvashi, I thought it would be interesting to start by you telling us a bit about the unique circumstances in which this book came about. Because this book is actually not written by you, but it's written by your father. But you had a very important role to play in the publishing of this book. So if you could tell us about how this book came about and the unique circumstances of this book.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me here. So yes, I think as you rightly mentioned, this book is my father's book, and of course we'll talk more about the book subsequently. And I think the thing that really stood out about this book when he started writing it, that he really wanted it to be written as his own journey, which is a fantastic journey that he had, both personally and professionally. Professionally, he was a civil servant, both domestic and international. But he never thought of this book as, a book which was meant to be preaching or giving any lessons on, how he lived his life and what it is to be a civil servant. He just looked at it as, his own life story, which was actually quite interesting and, has some fantastic anecdotes. And so he started writing this, and he actually wrote it entirely on his handheld device, which I think, for most people, is really something that is quite surprising. He used to write bits and pieces of it, email it to himself, and then we used to do some corrections, and that's how it eventually became a book. We didn't even realize when it actually became a book. And then, unfortunately, in the midst of the pandemic, he fell ill, and he passed away in 2021. And this then really became my sort of personal project, mission, call it what you like, to get his story to the world, because I truly believe that, professionally, personally, as a human being, he was exceptional and extraordinary, and I think there's so much that all of us can learn from his journey. So I really, then kind of started this process of trying to get his memoirs published. It was obviously a very difficult journey because the author, is not here, and a lot of publishers would say to me, look, this is a fantastic story, but we can't publish it, because the author himself is not here. Who's going to promote it? Who's going to read it? But I didn't give up, and eventually we did find a great publisher in Westland, and the book, finally did come out just a couple of months ago or so. It has been officially released.
So congratulations on achieving something that has been truly a huge challenge, both personally for you as well as, of course, getting the book published. And I know some of the hoops that you had to go through to get here. So it's great that it's now at a Lit Fest, and I'm sure you'll be at many other Lit Fests. Moving to the book itself, obviously one of the questions that I see being asked in all these questions of the authors is, why should somebody read the book? And what's so special about your book that we should buy it or read it? So I know you're very close to the book, and obviously this is your father's story. But from your standpoint, what's unique about the book, and why should people read it?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, it's not a book just for civil servants, which can be something that a lot of people might feel initially, because my father was in the Indian Administrative Service for a large part of his career. He then went on to work in the United Nations, in the World Intellectual Property Organization in Geneva, and of course a lot of what he talks about in the book is his professional journey. But I think there are so many lessons that come out of the book, and like I said, he makes no efforts to really bring these lessons out in any kind of way that could seem like he's preaching to his readers. But just as you read the anecdotes, that he shares there, there's so much that, I think everybody can learn. I mean, it's not just, civil servants, but anybody, and I think especially young people. There's a lot of values that come out from that. And I think, so if I just look at the professional part of the journey, he was a very unique civil servant as well. There's a lot of civil servant books that are available. But I think he had a very unique journey because he served in 3 very diverse states of India, Tamil Nadu, UP, and Uttarakhand. And especially, the move he describes from Tamil Nadu to UP, which he says, is almost like serving in 2 different countries. I think that is very interesting. I think his whole transition from being a national, Indian civil servant to an international civil servant, when he works in the United Nations for a long period of time, and he was working in the World Intellectual Property Organization, that is a very interesting transition. And how does he manage all the politics, and bureaucracy that comes with a UN organization? So I think that is, something, I think the whole journey is very interesting. He talks a lot about the nexus between politicians and bureaucrats. And I think we have so much discourse on that these days, especially a lot of civil servants say that, we feel a lot of political pressure. And my father talks about in his book that, political pressure is nothing new. It's always been there, and it all depends on what metal you are made of, as a civil servant. And he narrates an episode in that, in which he actually tells Mulayam Singh Yadav, who was the sitting chief minister of UP at that time, that, look, I'm going to have to arrest you if you don't control your supporters, because, he was in charge. My father was in charge of an election that was happening at that time, and there was a scuffle between Mulayam Singh Yadav supporters and the Congress supporters. So I don't know how many civil servants today have the courage to, go up to a sitting chief minister and say that I'll arrest you, if you don't stop this. So I think just like this, there's so much that he brings out, which is fascinating. But like I said, it goes well beyond, what you would learn as a civil servant. I think you would learn a lot of things personally, professionally, which I think all of us can use, in our lives and careers.
One of the things that I found about the book was that it was an easy read. While there is a lot to learn, like you said, it's very rich in the examples, the content. And I think he did have a very unique life. Like you said, there are bureaucrats, and there are lots of people now writing about their lives. The fact that he had served 3 different states, the center, at the international level. But there was something about the style and the ease with which the book flows that in some ways you can start the book anywhere and not have to read it from start to finish and read parts of it and still be inspired. What do you think, where do you think that came from? I know him as somebody who was always a great storyteller and would say things in a fun and a happy manner that shows through in a book. Do you think that had a role to play in why the book is what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's a very easy, breezy read. So many people have sent me messages that, look, once we started, we couldn't put it down, and we just finished it in one night. We finished it in a matter of few hours because it's so engaging. And I think that was his personality, and that shines through the book. He was always someone who never took himself too seriously. I think, when you're a civil servant and you're a bureaucrat and you're at such senior positions, at times, you can end up taking yourself a bit too seriously. But he never did that. And he always, looked at the lighter side of things and the lighter side of life. He was great at mimicry, and he does talk about that, how he used to do mimicry at the academy where all the IAS officers are trained. So he talks a lot about, the lighter kind of incidents, episodes, or even just the humor he saw in otherwise difficult or serious situations, and I think that was his great ability, that he could see the other side. So I think that is what makes the book also very, because sometimes I feel that when civil servants, I've read some of the other civil servants' books, and some of them have been my father's colleagues as well. So people I greatly respect and admire and have great affection for. But I think sometimes as a reader, it can feel like they're really trying to give you some lessons. But this book doesn't. It just says, okay, this is my story. It's up to you, what you draw from it. And I think there is a lot, and there is a lot of inspiration you'll draw from it. But it's told in a very light-hearted and engaging manner.
Now, not many of us get to read a father's autobiography. So when you read the book, were there any surprises for you? Did you feel like there were things that you didn't know about or things that you discovered? Can you talk about any of those, if there were any?
I think, obviously, I think a lot of the incidents, because, like you said, he's a great storyteller. So even when we would just sit around the dinner table or we would be at a family gathering, and a lot of times he would narrate episodes which have found their way into the book. But I think I've never, this kind of, collection of all these episodes strung together in this manner. This is something that obviously I had also never been exposed to, and it becomes so much more better, when you read it in that entire context that he provides there. And you see his transition and his growth, through the book, both at a personal level, as a professional level. He also talks about, his bond with his wife, my mother, for instance, or with me, which I think is really very touching. And I think that's something that we love reading, over and over again, because that really shows his great human side, which he also brought to his job, interestingly, and he does talk about that. So I think there were many things that, I knew that, those had happened in his life, but I didn't have the full context, or I didn't have, the full sort of sequence in which they had happened, which I think came through, once he wrote this book.
Now, you are involved in the government yourself. You work at the Niti Aayog, and you've been there for quite a few years now. Are there lessons for you as a professional that you've taken from reading the book that you think have changed the way you approach your work and your professional life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's just so much, I think the virtues that he talks about there, for instance, he says that loyalty, to your organization, to people you're working for, that loyalty is so important, that treating your colleagues like family, and he was a very tough taskmaster, when he needed to be. But he was also a great mentor to his, service colleagues, and then even in the UN. He really helped a lot of his colleagues along their way in their careers. So I think that is something that, I've really kind of imbibed from his journey and what he's written in that. But also the fact that you need patience. Patience is a great virtue. Time, he writes several times in the book that, at this particular time when this happened to me in my professional life, I was devastated, or I thought it's the end of the world. And then 5 years later, when I look back at it, I think, wow, that was the best thing to happen to me. So I think that's a great virtue, that sometimes things are not, exactly how you see it at that moment. And so, you need to be patient, or you need to give things time. So I think that is another very important one. And also, I think the fact where he actually narrates a certain episode, and then he says that you meet the same people on your way down as you meet on your way up. And I think that's also a great thing, that we can all take away in our work lives and our careers, that, treat everyone with respect, with kindness, because you never know, who you will come across in your life, either in a professional context or in a personal context. So I think just so many lessons that I have drawn and tried to implement in my own life.
In the reactions that you've gotten about the book from various people, and I'm sure you've heard from colleagues, friends, young people, older people, what are some of the things that you have heard that have been unique or differentiating about the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've been amazed by the range of people who have actually really enjoyed reading the book. Like I said, that, I was sort of little apprehensive and afraid that, is this going to be a book which will just get limited to the UPSC, aspirants or to the civil servants? And because I didn't want that, and I think my father didn't want that, because he certainly didn't see himself as just that, and so I think I'm very happy that the kind of reactions I've been getting even from my peers or colleagues or friends, or just people from completely unrelated, walks of life and professions saying that, we just loved it and we took away so much from this book. And I think of course, the standout thing that all of them have said that they love the humor in it. They love the little, anecdotes he's brought out. And they said, we hardly ever thought of seeing a civil servant in this light. I mean, civil servants we think of in a very different way. And this, this book is, is bringing it out in a completely different light. So I think that it really stands out. And I think it's been a very sort of consistent comment that I've got from everybody that, we love that it's an easy read, we love that there's so much humor, but there's so much we take away from this book and that, we can implement in our everyday lives.
Now, in recent times, and in fact, one of these people I saw was on the list of speakers at the Lit Fest here. Books by civil servants have also created controversies, and they've named people, and it's gotten into the press, and people have said what happened, what didn't happen. People have had to explain what they wrote and why they wrote that. I got the sense that this book didn't have any of that, despite this dealing with very sensitive individuals and people. So people have been named. Do you think he consciously did that? Did you have to do that as you put the book together to say, hey, circumstances are such that we need to temper this, or was it just the way it was always written?
Yeah, I think as a civil servant, and especially for someone like him who worked with a lot of people in power, politically powerful people, like Mulayam Singh Yadav, Narayan Dutt Tiwari, all of these people have been chief ministers, and, he worked directly with them. And so there's a lot that you're privy to, and he's talked about the Babri Masjid demolition, a lot of what happened at that time, the murder of Syed Modi, the famous badminton player, the reforms, the liberalization of 1991 and kind of what went, happened around that time behind the scenes. So there's a lot of sensitive things and obviously people. And then even when he went on to the UN, there's a lot of things that happened there too, which could be sensitive. So I think we discussed this a lot, and I think he was very conscious that he did not want this book. It was not meant to be naming or shaming anyone. So, he had to take certain names because obviously otherwise without that, people, the readers wouldn't get any context. But he did that with a great sense of responsibility. He could have also put a lot of inflammatory statements and, he could have also put things that would go viral. But that was a conscious choice that, that's not what this is about. I want people to read this as a story and read it for, what it is and not kind of just focus on one part or one anecdote or one episode. So he has named people, but it has been done with a great, degree of responsibility. And he's in fact even put disclaimers that, look, whatever I'm saying is verifiable, through official government files. I'm not saying anything which is, which you can't verify. So he's been deliberately very conscious, and we did discuss this a lot. And in fact, even, as we were trying to get the book published, we had a lot of this discussion that are there still parts of it that we want to kind of censor, but we decided not to do that because, and I think that was my call. I wanted to be completely honest to what he had written, and so apart from minor editorial changes here and there, we really did not touch any of the substance because I wanted his story to come out the way he wanted it to be told, and I think he had already exercised a great degree of caution. So,
what about the title? Had he already picked the title, or did you come up with the title, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so he actually writes in the book, that, and I think towards the end he writes that, ultimately, we're all small cogs in a large revolving, wheel of life that goes up and down, and, time stops for nobody, life stops for nobody. So he'd kind of written that. So it's from that I, picked this out, because I thought that it wonderfully represented his view to life. It wonderfully represented your role as a civil servant. You're always a small cog, in a very large wheel. And so I think it in every way exemplified, what the book is about and stands for. So I thought it was a suitable title.
I think we can open it up for questions if people have questions, and I can continue the discussion here. If you raise your hand, I think there are people here who will take the mic around. But I wanted to talk to you about how has this book actually affected you personally? I think you are going through some of your own personal challenges with your health. I know that you are writing a lot about it, very boldly. And do you think you'll write more? Do you think you'll write a book about what you're going through? And could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that I think my father has always been my biggest inspiration, and I think now, even though he's not physically with me, the kind of challenges that I'm facing in my life, like you said, I'm going through a serious health crisis, and it's an ongoing thing. So I think I draw a lot of courage and inspiration from his book, his journey, what he stood for in life, because I think he always believed that, tough times are going to come. And the best way you can deal with it is, put your best foot forward, and keep going, and eventually you should see better times ahead. So I think with that kind of philosophy and with the inspiration I draw from him, I continue, and yes, I think a lot of people do tell me that I should write a book, because it is quite I think it could make for quite an interesting, fascinating story. So who knows, I might do that someday. It's not on the cards right now, but maybe I will.
Well, you should continue to write. I think from what you've been writing on social media, I find it very inspirational, and I hope you will put some more thoughts down, and maybe it will culminate into a book one day. I don't see any. Oh, there is a hand up there. So. Oh, you need the mic.
What do you see has changed in the bureaucracy and the functioning from then to how it is with you and the way you operate today, Urvashi?
So I think, one thing that I think the big change, which I think my father also talks about in the book, and certainly I also feel it, is just the social media and how much more bureaucrats now engage with and have to engage with. And I think there's pros and cons with the media, with social media in particular. So I think that's one big difference, because the kind of era that my father and even my mother, who's also a civil servant, came from, they were always fairly media shy, and it was, as a civil servant, you were just meant to quietly do your work, and only interact with the media if your job demanded it. But now it's very different. I also think that at times now, the lines, between the politics and the bureaucracy, sometimes they can get a bit blurred, and a bit too blurred. And my father kind of says, as he writes in the book, that he doesn't just blame any one or the other side for it. I think he says it's something that we have naturally seen happen over time. But it's something we need to consciously check and see whether, that's the direction we really want to go in, because the whole idea of the bureaucracy was to have this separation, and not be succumbing to, political pressures, as he puts it. But he says you can only do that if you're not seeking any favors, from your political masters. Otherwise, you have to be subservient. And I think that is a principle that I really try to stand by in whatever work I do, that I try to be as honest to my training. Like I work in the health sector, and so I'm trained in public health. And so I try to be as honest to that in whatever work I'm doing, without, reflecting necessarily something which might be happening on the political side. So I think it's a tough balance, and it's only gotten tougher. over the years. But I think the onus is on, a lot of the onus is on, the civil servant in this case, or, people who are working in government, to make sure that they stay honest to their work, and they don't succumb to these political pressures. They don't get too attached to their chairs, as my father puts it in the book.
Any other questions?
I think the book lends itself to OTT series. I think the vignettes in the book would make for a fairly engaging 13 episodes. Or have suggestions like that come forward, and are you considering it?
Yeah, lots of suggestions, and in fact, my husband, who does work, with a lot of OTT material, I've been trying to convince him, and hopefully, he will oblige. But yeah, like you said, that the story itself is great, and definitely lends itself to that format. And I think my dad would be the happiest person, because he always used to say that I'm a performer, what am I doing in the civil service? I should have been in Bollywood, or, I should have been in somewhere else. So he'll be delighted if there's an OTT series made on this.
I think we are almost at time, right? So Urvashi, thank you so much. It's been great discussing the book with you. It's been a special privilege for me. As you know, we have a very special relationship, and I think this is the first time that we are sharing the stage together. But I do hope that you will continue to write, and that you will soon write a sequel to the book, and to answer Krishna's question about how the bureaucracy has changed. Maybe you can tell some of your stories. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining this evening.